I transmigrated into a good-for-nothing from the 1960s who had been literally frozen to death by his stepmother. The moment I opened my eyes, my younger brother was cursing me for slacking off. I raised my hand and slapped him so hard he flew 3 meters away. The kid was stunned. My father and stepmother went crazy, and I dismantled all the pots and pans. With 3 jeans of cornmeal tucked under my arm, I plunged into the snowy forest without looking back. Revenge? No rush. Once I build the shack the system gave me, set up the iron pot, and get some hot mush into my mouth, I won't let a single one of that family of beasts off the hook. I watched as Gu Bao poured the last bowl of corn mush into his own bowl and slammed the empty pot onto the stove. Bro, Mom said you didn't earn any work points tonight, so there's no food for you. I stared at his shiny, well-fed face, then looked at the half bowl of pot rinsing water by the stove that was my only food for today. Gu Bao was 15, wearing a new padded cotton jacket and suede leather shoes, plump all over. I was 20, wearing a ragged padded jacket with the cotton stuffing sticking out, my toes poking through holes in my shoes, without an ounce of flesh on me. What are you looking at? Gu Bao slammed the bowl onto the table. Why aren't you getting out there to fix the pigsty? Mom said there'll be a blizzard tonight. If the pigs freeze to death, can you afford to pay for them? I said nothing. I was too hungry, so hungry it felt like a dull knife was sawing back and forth in my stomach. My head was heavy and dizzy, and my forehead was burning. Sun Yumei lifted the curtain and came out from the inner room, her voice shrill. What are you standing there for? Waiting for me to feed you? Take that bundle of dry straw in the woodshed and spread it in the pigsty. If even one pig freezes to death, forget about getting your work points for the next half year. I looked at her. She was wearing a blue cotton padded jacket, with rabbit fur sewn onto the cuffs, and her face was smeared with vanishing cream, pale and neat looking. She had married into this family 8 years ago, and I had grown up for 8 years. Since I was 12, I'd been smashing rocks for the production team to earn work points. More than 300 work points a year, all of them clutched in her hands. Damn it, I said. My voice was very low, but the room fell silent for a moment. Sun Yumei glared at me. What did you say? I said. I stood up, my legs a little weak, damn it. Sun Yumei shrieked. Gu Shanjin, listen to what that thing you raised just said. My dad came out from the inner room, shoulders hunched, looked at me, then at Sun Yumei, and finally roared at me. Why aren't you getting your ass to work? Didn't you hear what your mother said? I looked at him. My father, Gu Shanjin, was 53. In his early years, he had also been a strong laborer, but ever since Sun Yumei entered the household, he'd become mute. When I could work, he acted like I wasn't his son, and when I couldn't work, he still acted like I wasn't his son. Fine, I said. I turned and walked out. The moment I stepped outside, the blizzard poured into my collar, and I shivered, my whole body feeling as if someone had hollowed me out from the inside. In the woodshed, I collapsed onto the pile of straw, and my vision kept going black. From morning until now, I'd only had a bowl of pot rinsing water, missed 2 meals, and I'd already felt something was wrong when I got back from fixing the pigsty last night. It was like I'd swallowed a handful of sand, and my body was so hot you could have cooked flatbread on it. But Sun Yumei didn't care about that, she only cared about work points. I closed my eyes, listening to the wind outside howl like ghosts, thinking, when would this life ever end? And then I lost consciousness. When I became aware again, I was lying in a woodshed that leaked wind from all 4 sides, my whole body aching as if someone had rolled me from head to toe with a rolling pin. I sat up, but my head was still dizzy. Looking down, I saw a lump of torn cotton batting covering me, hard enough to crack walnuts. The moldy smell made me cough nonstop. This wasn't my woodshed. I looked around at the wooden walls, a hay roof, and a chipped broken clay bowl tossed by my feet, with a layer of ice crusted along the rim. Something was wrong. Wasn't I repairing the pig pen? Didn't I collapse in the woodshed with a fever? My head suddenly buzzed, like a whole wall of information had come crashing in, and I clutched my head in pain. When I opened my eyes again, I understood. I was dead. Guang, the one Sun Yumei had worked like an animal for 20 years, had collapsed in the woodshed with a high fever last night and frozen to death. Now someone else was occupying his body. Fuck. I cursed, my voice hoarse as sandpaper. Then I laughed. Good riddance. That beast of a family had finally worn him to death. But what am I supposed to do now? In this body, my fever still hasn't gone down. I have no strength at all. My stomach is growling with emptiness. And outside, the -30-degree blizzard is still raging. I have to live. No matter what, I have to survive. Then a voice sounded in my head. Detected strong survival instinct in host. Scanning environment. Temporal coordinates 1960. Conditions for activation met. Wilderness craftsman system activated. I froze for a second, and then a pale blue panel popped up before my eyes. On it were 4 modules: appraisal view, inventory unlimited, crafting bench, blueprint construction. Fuck. The standard transmigrator package? I forced myself to sit up straight and looked at the chipped clay bowl by my feet. With a thought, appraisal view lit up. Damaged clay bowl material. Inferior clay status. On the verge of shattering, can be decomposed into. Clay shard. X2. I swallowed and chose decompose. The bowl was gone. A new line of text appeared in the inventory. Clay shard, X2. I was fucking delighted. This thing was amazing. I stood up. My legs were still a little weak, but my mind was much clearer. This woodshed was where the original owner had lived for 20 years, and where he had died too. Now I was leaving, and I couldn't leave empty-handed. This family had squeezed him dry for 20 years. Taking a little interest wasn't too much, was it? Just as I was about to head out, the door slammed open. Gu Bao came in with his head hunched, wearing that thick cotton jacket of his. When he saw me standing there, he froze for a moment, then immediately raised his brows. Bro, you've really got some nerve, still lying here pretending to be dead? Mom told you to go smash cold briquettes in the backyard, didn't you hear? I looked at him. He kept talking. You're the only one in this family eating for free, and you still want to slack off? How can you be so thick-skinned? He didn't get to finish. I slapped him across the face. I didn't hold back. I used all the strength in my body. Gu Bao spun half a circle on the spot and landed on the ground on his butt, clutching his face, completely stunned. I watched his face slowly swell up, and even the pain in my stomach seemed to ease a little. You dare hit me? He shrieked, loud enough to pierce the roof. I walked over and kicked him in the stomach. He yelped and doubled over like a shrimp. Grabbing him by the collar, I hauled him up from the ground, dragged him to the doorway, and kicked him into the snow. Get lost. I stood in the doorway, looking down at him. Gu Bao scrambled to his feet, half his face swollen and the other half white, and started howling, Mom. Dad. Murder. My brother's gone crazy. He's going to beat me to death. He took off running, so fast that all he left behind in the snow was a string of black footprints. I shut the door and slid the bolt into place. I knew that in 10 minutes at most, Sun Yume and my father would come charging back. But I still had 10 minutes. System. Appraisal interface, activate. I rushed into the kitchen. I saw the black cast iron pot the whole family used for meals. Thin-bottomed iron pot, rusty material. Cast iron status. Good, can be disassembled into. Cast iron, X4 disassemble. The pot was gone. I pulled open the dish cabinet, wooden lock, and smashed it open with one punch. Inside was an oil paper bundle. I opened it. Cornmeal, about 3 gene. Cornmeal, about 3 gene quality. Coarse, can be stored in inventory store. Next to it was a small clay jar. Coarse salt, a little less than half a jar. Coarse salt, a little less than half a jar. Quality. Inferior, can be stored in inventory store. I didn't have time to search slowly anymore. I rushed to the corner of the yard and saw the firewood axe. Firewood axe blade, chipped. Material. Inferior iron. Mixed wood, can be disassembled into. Inferior iron, X5. Wood, X1 disassemble. The axe was gone too. I was about to rush back to the woodshed when chaos erupted outside the yard gate. You little bastard. You've really gone too far. Go on. Get your ass out here. That voice of Sun Yume's could be heard from half a street away. And there were my dad's flustered footsteps too. That fast. I gritted my teeth, knowing I couldn't take them head on. In my current condition, going up against them would be suicide. I rushed back to the woodshed and grabbed that tattered wad of cotton batting. Damaged cotton batting material. Shoddy cotton. Rags, can be disassembled into. Inferior cotton, X2. Scrap cloth, X3 disassemble. The woodshed was empty. I yanked open the back window, turned over and jumped out, landing in the snowdrift behind the house. My knee slammed into the frozen hard ground, and the pain made me suck in a sharp breath. But compared to the emptiness in my stomach and the heat in my head, that little pain was nothing. I got up and ran toward the woods. Behind me in the house, Sun Yume's shriek tore through the wind. Guang. You damn bastard. Where did you hide the pot? You thieving little wretch. I let out a cold laugh and, without looking back, plunged straight into the vast snowy forest. I ran for who knew how long, the snow reaching my knees, the white gale cutting at my face. Only when Bangshwigu was completely out of sight behind me did I stop, bracing myself against a Korean pine, bent over, my lungs burning, the white breath I coughed out like great clouds of smoke. I went over what I'd just done. 1 pot, 1 axe, 1 tattered quilt, 3 gene of cornmeal, half a jar of coarse salt. That was all. The winter clothes hidden under the Kong cabinet in the main room. And my dad's toolbox too. I hadn't had time to touch them. But I didn't regret it. It was worth it. Thinking of Gu Bao's swollen pig face. Thinking of the look on Sun Yume's face when she discovered the iron pot was gone. I felt a rush of satisfaction. That was the resentment the original owner had bottled up for 20 years. Now I'd vented the first bit of it for him. Rest easy, I said. I've taken over your body, and I'll avenge you. The wind poured into my mouth, making me choke into another fit of coughing. I wrapped my thin, drafty, ragged, padded jacket tighter around myself. No, I had to survive first. The high fever wasn't letting up, and my body had no strength. If I kept freezing like this, I wouldn't make it through tonight. System, open the crafting bench. The pale blue panel unfolded, and I looked through it. Under the armor category was a lit-up blueprint. Simple cold weather clothing damaged required materials. Inferior cotton X2, scrap cloth X3 crafting time. 60 seconds description. An ugly but barely usable piece of clothing, better than nothing. This was it. I tapped craft. The cotton and scrap cloth in the inventory disappeared, and a countdown started ticking. 60 seconds. I hugged the tree trunk and crouched down, my teeth chattering, my vision blurring in waves. I had to hold on. If I passed out now, that would be death. 3, 2, 1. Crafting complete. A piece of clothing appeared in the inventory. Patch upon patch, bloated like a burlap sack, gray, ugly and rustic looking. I took it out and put it on, then took off the ragged padded jacket I was wearing and casually disassembled it into scrap cloth X1. The moment I put it on, a solid warmth wrapped around me. Although the system labeled it as damaged, the low-quality cotton was evenly stuffed into the lining, and the seams were tightly sealed, not letting in even a trace of wind. I let out a long breath and felt my frozen hands and feet slowly recover a little. Phew, at least I can make it through tonight. I opened appraisal view and started looking for a place to settle down in the mountains. After walking for about 2 or 3 hours, my strength hit bottom again, and the high fever made my vision swim in waves. Then my foot slipped, and I rolled down the slope. When I opened my eyes again, I was lying in a concave mountain hollow. Pine woods lay to my left and right, and behind me was a rock wall more than 10 meters high, blocking the north wind. At the base of the rock wall, a small stream half buried under ice and snow was still babbling away. I got up, rubbed the spots that hurt from the fall, and my eyes lit up with delight. Sheltered from the wind, with water, stones, and trees. Granite cliff face hard status, stable collectible, hard stone, flint medium probability Korean pine forest dense status, healthy collectible, hardwood, pine resin, pine cones. I crouched at the foot of the rock wall and smiled. This place will be where I build my home. I have to build one I can't hold on otherwise. I hadn't been idle on the way here either, and a few more things had appeared in my inventory. Dry firewood 12. Picked up from the ground flinks 2. Chipped off from stones, unknown berries frozinks 5. The system showed it was analyzing the berries, with the prompt analyzing. 5 minutes. I hope they're edible. I'm too hungry. I leaned against the rock wall, feeling as if my body were melting from the inside, heat seeping out from every crack in my bones. No, I need to quickly make a place I can live in. I opened the crafting bench, under the buildings category, and the first blueprint that lit up was simple lean to required materials, Wooks 10, scrap cloths 3, or Hakes 20. Right now I only have one piece of scrap cloth, but hay can be gathered on the spot. Craft, simple stone axe. I selected hard stone X1 and dry firewooks 1 from my inventory. New recipe unlocked. Simple stone axe crafting, 10 seconds. A crude stone axe appeared in my hand. Gripping it, I walked toward the nearest Korean pine. Bang. The first swing of the axe made my entire arm go numb from the shock. Bang bang. Gritting my teeth, I swung the axe mechanically. Each strike made my vision go dark for a moment. This body is too weak. It had been underfed for too long, and the high fever burned like live coals. Every swing was overdrawing myself. But I can't stop. The system spared me all the technique. All I had to do was make the chopping motion, and it would count the progress. Hardwooks 1. Hardwooks 2. By the time I felled one tree, I was almost face down on the ground. I need 10 units of wood to build the lean-to, and I also have to get extra firewood to make a fire, plus hay. I used the stone axe to scrape aside the snow, exposing the withered yellow thatch underneath, frozen as stiff as wire. Withered thatch, collectible. Hay. I cut at it stroke by stroke, my fingers frozen numb. Hakes 1. Hakes 5. By the time I gathered hardwooks 10, Hakes 20, plus a pile of dry firewood, dusk had already begun to fall. My strength was completely spent, and the high fever filled my vision with dancing white specks. I practically crawled back under that rock wall. System build. Simple lean-to. I selected blueprint construction. A semi-transparent blue, semicircular frame floated before my eyes. I pressed the back of the frame tightly against the rock wall, with the opening facing the stream. Build. I fed all the wood and hay into it. Under construction. Estimated time, 10 minutes. During these 10 minutes, I curled up on the ground, feeling like a candle burnt down to the end. Cold drilled into my bones from all directions. Even simple cold weather clothing couldn't keep it out. 3, 2, 1. Construction complete. A low, ugly but tightly sealed shelter appeared, embedded against the rock wall. I scrambled and crawled inside, and the wide-out wind was instantly shut out. The world went quiet. I leaned against the hay wall, gasping for quite a while, then opened the crafting bench. New recipe unlocked. Flint fire starter required materials. Flinks 1, Hakes 1 crafting time, 5 seconds craft. A tool made of 2 pieces of flint and a small handful of dry tinder appeared in my hand. I selected campfire under blueprint construction again. Required materials. Dry firewoods 5. Flinks 1, a ghostly frame appeared in the open space in the middle of the shelter, and I threw the materials into it. Construction complete. A pile of firewood, stacked scientifically with a ventilation gap left underneath, appeared. I crawled over and struck the tinder with the flint fire starter with a sharp click. A small flame leapt up and licked at the dry wood. The orange-red light lit up my face. Warmth. That heat that could scald a person to death, that could bring a person back to life, slowly spread outward from the fire. I almost cried. My stomach started burning again, reminding me, now I had fire, but what about food? I opened the crafting bench and looked at the pig irons 4 in my inventory. New recipe unlocked. Crude iron pot required materials. Pig irons 3 crafting time. 5 minutes description. Heavy and rough, but absolutely durable. Craft. While the progress bar was filling, I crawled out of the shelter, smashed a hole in the ice over the stream beneath the rock wall, and cupped a few mouthfuls of piercingly cold ice water down my throat. By the time I got back, the iron pot was finished. A black iron pot with casting marks appeared in the inventory. I wiped it with snow, scooped half a pot of stream water into it, and set it over the campfire. Steam began to rise. I took out the 3 gene of cornmeal from the inventory, grabbed 2 handfuls, and sprinkled them into the pot, then scraped in a little salt. Glug glug. The yellow mush rolled and bubbled, and a rough but overbearing grain aroma filled the whole shelter. Holding a wooden spoon I had whittled with a stone axe, I scooped up a spoonful of the scalding mush and stuffed it into my mouth. Huh, hot. I gasped from the burn, but that stream of heat slid down my esophagus into my stomach. That warmth, that fragrance, that solid, tangible taste of something that belonged to me. I leaned against that pile of hay, watching the fire, watching the pot, and at last the tears came. This was the first bite of hot food I'd eaten in this world. I didn't have to watch anyone else's face. Didn't have to wait for others to finish and lick the bottom of the bowl. It was just me, eating as much as I wanted. After a few bites, my stomach finally had something in it, and the high fever and exhaustion came crashing over me together. My head lolled to one side against the hay wall, my eyelids so heavy they felt filled with lead. The wind was still howling outside, but here I had a fire burning, mush in the pot, and a shelter sealed up tight. I was safe. Before consciousness faded, my last thought was, being alive is good. And at the same time, in Bonchue Gully, at the Gu family home, Sun Yume stood in front of the empty stove, shivering all over. Where that black iron pot had been, there was only a round gray mark left. She stood there with her mouth open, like someone was strangling her. Then she squatted down and plopped onto the icy ground, smacking her thighs with both hands as a wail squeezed out of her throat that hardly sounded human. We can't go on living like this anymore. Gu Shanjin, you dead man. Look at the fine son you raised. He's going to drive our whole family to death. Hissed by the earthen Kong in the corner of the room, Gu Bao clutched his stomach, gasping from the pain. Those few blows from Guong were full of hatred, kicks and punches alike, and Gu Bao felt as if all his internal organs had been knocked out of place. On that face of his, usually spoiled into looking arrogant and overbearing, it was now black and blue, filled with venomous resentment. Mom, he's gone crazy. That bastard has really gone crazy. Gu Bao gritted his teeth, tears and snot smeared all over his face. He dared to hit me. He actually dared to hit me. Dad, did you see that? He was trying to kill me. Sun Yume and Gu Bao, one howling over the loss of property, the other howling over the intense pain in his body. After cursing for quite a while, cold and hungry, the two finally fell silent together. They turned their heads at the same time and fixed Gu Shanjin, the only one in the room still sitting there with hateful, demanding stares. Gu Shanjin was squatting on the edge of the Kong, puffing away at his pipe, his face so gloomy it looked like water could drip from it. Gu Shanjin, say something. Sun Yume sprang to her feet, pointed at his nose and cursed. Your precious son stole the family's pot, and beat up my bower. He's trying to turn the world upside down. As his father, how are you going to deal with him? Gu Bao also clutched his stomach, his tearful voice laced with viciousness. Dad, you have to go drag him back. Break his legs. Otherwise next time he'll dare to take a knife to us. Get him. You have to drag him back. Sun Yume shrieked. The noise made Gu Shang'an's head throb. Irritated, he knocked the ash out of his pipe. Of course he was angry too, but that anger wasn't because his eldest son had gone hungry and cold, nor because his younger son had been beaten, but because his authority as head of the family had been challenged by that beast of burden who had always worked without complaint. But at the thought of going to drag him back, Gu Shanjin glanced out the window. The window paper was rattling loudly in the wind. It was already dark outside, and the snow was falling even harder. The white gale scraping across his face would feel like knives cutting. Go charging into the woods now to look for that unfilial son? He was unwilling. He couldn't bear to risk this good padded cotton coat of his, and he was afraid of freezing himself sick. In his eyes, that eldest son had never been favored anyway, not worth taking such a risk for. What are you howling for? Gu Shanjin finally spoke, pointing his pipe stem at Sun Yume. He snapped. Can you howl the pot back? Then go after him yourself. Go after him. Gu Shanjin let out a cold snort, and shrank farther back onto the Kong, finding himself an excuse to save face. In this pitch-dark night, with wind and snow this heavy, where would anyone even go to chase him? It's not like he could grow wings and fly away. He slowly packed another bowl of tobacco, lit it with a fire striker, took a deep drag, and only then said unhurriedly, "Don't worry." He exhaled a thick cloud of smoke, a numb sort of confidence and total control appearing on his face. He won't get far. With only those rags on him, how long can he hold out? And in the woods, since when are wolves and black bears vegetarians? He shot Gu Bao a glance. He's just acting on impulse, gone mad for the moment. Later, once his stomach starts growling and he's frozen through, he'll know how good this home is. He'll come crawling back on his own. Sun Yume was still unwilling to let it go. What if? What if he doesn't come back? He wouldn't dare. Gu Shanjin slammed the Kong table, making the dust on top jump. He stood up and put on the air of the patriarch, speaking in a tone that allowed no doubt. I, Gu Shanjin, am his father. Filial piety is above all else. I raised him for 20 years. I trained him long ago. He knows the rules and understands that if he leaves this family, he's nothing but a fart. He doesn't even have household registration wherever he goes. He's just a drifter. With his hands behind his back, Gu Shanjin walked to the doorway and looked at the wind and snow outside, as if he could already see Guang kneeling on the ground begging for mercy. He can't get away. At most, by tomorrow morning, he'll be kneeling at the door begging me for mercy. When that time comes, he bared his yellow teeth and smiled. Then I'll settle the score with him. A strong, pungent burnt smell suddenly choked Guang awake from his heavy slumber. Oh no. He jerked upright, and the sudden wave of dizziness nearly made him topple over. The campfire in the shack was still burning steadily, but in the crude iron pot set over the fire, wreaths of black smoke were drifting out. Damn it. I overslept. Guang's heart tightened. In these times of scarce supplies, wasting even the smallest bit of food was a crime. Enduring the weakness left by the high fever, he scrambled over and took the iron pot off the fire. The little bit of precious cornmeal in the pot had already burned completely dry, and a thick layer of blackened crust had formed on the bottom. Hunger came over him like a tide. Guang didn't care that it was hot, much less the bitter burnt taste. He grabbed the wooden spoon he had carved earlier and pried hard at the bottom of the pot. Crack! A piece of blackened crust came loose. He didn't even have time to blow off the black ash on it before stuffing it impatiently into his mouth. Hard, hot, and bitter. But when that scorching food, carrying the smoky taste of charcoal, slid into his stomach, an indescribable surge of warmth instantly burst forth. This was heat. It was exactly what his body needed right now. Guang chewed in big mouthfuls, scraping every last bit of crust from the pot, along with the unburned edges, and swallowing it all. After a whole pot of burnt corn mush went down, he felt as if he had come back to life. It was as though a long-lost energy had been injected into his body. The dizziness caused by the high fever was forcibly suppressed by quite a bit, and his icy limbs recovered a trace of feeling and strength. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Guang let out a long breath. He grabbed some spare dry firewood from the side and added a few more sticks to the campfire, making it burn even brighter. The warm firelight shone on his sallow face as he began to calmly think about what to do next. First was the question of identity. He knew very well that right now, he was a drifter. In this era, he had no household registration, no letter of introduction, and no grain ration booklet. Leaving Bangchwiga meant disappearing from Bangchwiga's household registry. In theory, he could hardly take a single step. Any checkpoint, or even the militia of any village or town, could arrest him. At best, he would be sent back to that home that devoured people without spitting out the bones. At worst, he'd be labeled a bad element and sent to labor reform. But he wasn't worried in the slightest. So what if I'm a drifter? Guang let out a cold laugh. Why do I need to go into the city? Why do I need to rely on them? He glanced at the wilderness craftsman system in his mind. I have the system. This vast forest and snowy wilderness is my greatest support. His current situation was both a predicament and freedom. At this time, the northern frontier was still the great northern wilderness, with land needing to be reclaimed everywhere. Once he develops his newbie village in the future, he'll be fully capable of standing on his own. He looked at the simple shack he was in now, barely large enough for him to lie down. The shack was only temporary, just a compromise for the moment. What he needed was a real house. A house sturdy and warm enough to withstand the northern frontier's 40-degree winters, store food, and have a heated brick bed. A wooden cabin. The crafting bench already had the blueprint for the wooden cabin foundation, but the wood and stone required were an astronomical amount. With only this simple stone axe and his weakened body, gathering all these materials wasn't very realistic. He had to upgrade his tools first, and then find enough food, so I'd have enough strength to hold out until the log cabin was built. Guang's thoughts became clearer and clearer. Once his body recovered a bit, he'd go hunting. Though this forest was bleak in winter, it still hid signs of life. Pheasants, rabbits, even foolish roe deer, these were all top-tier sources of protein. He needed meat to fully restore this body that had been depleted for far too long. And he needed animal fur to make a real fur coat that could withstand the cold. More importantly, he thought of one place, the black market. From the original owner's memories, although information was scarce, he vaguely knew that at a forestry transit station dozens of li away, people were privately trading supplies. Items made by the system were of a quality far beyond this era. Guang touched the simple cold weather clothing he was wearing. Although it was made of inferior cotton, the stitching and heat retention of system-made products were definitely better than what the supply and marketing cooperative had. If I hunt something rare, like a complete wolf pelt or ginseng, and take it to the black market, could I trade it for some scarce materials that the system can't synthesize? For example, better steel, fabric, medicine, or even gun parts? And then he could use those materials to make even better items. Then trade them for more and better materials. Once that thought arose, it could no longer be suppressed. Guang looked at the swirling snowstorm outside the shack, and the warm flames flickering inside the boundary between the two was stark. After escaping the Gu family, that nauseating hell, Guang felt that his life was only just beginning, full of hope. What he needed to do now was recover his health, and then upgrade the stone axe. The night passed without incident. The simple shack stood firm amid the howling whiteout, and the warmth from the campfire finally let Guang sleep more deeply in the latter half of the night. The weakness brought on by the high fever had mostly faded as the sweat left his body. At the first dim light of dawn, his body clock woke him up. The fire in the shack had dwindled to only a few dark red embers. The cold seeped in through every crack. Guang shivered and immediately climbed up to add fresh dry firewood to the fire. With a whoosh, the flames leapt back to life, bringing precious heat and light. He touched his forehead. The fever was gone. That was close. Guang felt deeply relieved. If he had a system, yet still died of a fever out on the snowy plain, that would really bring shame to the ranks of transmigrators. He opened the inventory, and more than half the bag of cornmeal was still left. He carefully ladled less than half a pot of snow water, sprinkled in only a thin layer of cornmeal, and pinched in a little coarse salt. He had to strictly control his food intake. In this wilderness, food was life, and every bit more he stored up meant a bit more assurance of survival. While waiting for the water to boil, he checked the system log and found that the berries had already been analyzed. Analysis complete. Frozen red berries quality, common effect, edible. Contains a small amount of sugar and water, non-toxic. Note, a common woodland berry, very low in calories. Edible. Guang's spirits lifted. He took out the 5 frozen berries from the inventory and first popped 2 into his mouth. The icy fruit skin melted in his mouth, and a faint sweetness and sourness stimulated his taste buds. Though low in calories, this was undoubtedly a precious source of vitamins. Guang didn't touch the remaining 3 and put them back into the inventory. Gurgle gurgle, the corn mush in the pot also began to bubble. This time, Guang stayed by it every step of the way, stirring constantly with a wooden spoon. Soon, the corn porridge was done. A bowl of thin but piping hot corn porridge went down his stomach, and warmth surged through his limbs once again. He felt that his body, which had been on the verge of its limit, finally regained a bit of strength. After breakfast, Guang stood up. Today's goal was very clear. He opened the crafting table and looked at the dim icon for the simple stone axe. Simple stone axe damage durability, 12-20 gathering efficiency. Low can be upgraded to reinforced stone axe, upgrade recipe new. Reinforced stone axe, required materials. Simple stone axe, X1, hard stone, X3, tough vine, X2 crafting time. 3 minutes description. Through reinforcement and counterweighting, gathering efficiency is slightly improved and durability is higher. Hard stone could be gathered from the rock wall, but there were no tough vines near the shelter. He had to go out and explore. Guang set today's tasks for himself. Gather enough hard stone, find tough vines, and complete the stone axe upgrade. Before dark, chop down as much wood as possible to prepare for building a wooden house. At the same time, explore the environment within 1 kilometer of the camp and get a clear picture of resource distribution and potential dangers. He picked up the stone axe and crawled out of the shelter. On the snowy plain in the early morning, the air was unbelievably cold. He came to the granite wall behind the camp and the appraisal view activated. Granite wall hard gatherable. Hard stone. Flint medium probability bang. He swung the stone axe and smashed it against the rock wall. This was even more strenuous than chopping wood. His hands were numb from the vibration. And could this broken stone axe really split granite? Although Guang had his doubts, he didn't stop. Bang. Bang. Sparks flew everywhere. Hard stone X1. Guang was stunned. The system was absurdly overpowered. Just keep chopping and leave the rest to the system. With results in hand, Guang worked even harder, swinging the stone axe in his hand like crazy. Flint X1. Hard stone X2. After expending a great deal of stamina and reducing the durability of the simple stone axe to only 520, he finally gathered 3 pieces of hard stone. He wiped the sweat from his brow and began exploring toward the eastern side of the mountain hollow, partly to gather the other material needed to upgrade the stone axe, the vines, and partly to look for other resources. Food would be even better. He was extremely cautious, keeping the appraisal view active at the bare minimum to help him distinguish the terrain beneath the snow and avoid stepping into empty space. The arduous trek paid off. On a wind-sheltered slope, he brushed aside the snow and discovered a large patch of vine plants frozen stiff beneath it. Old vines under the snow, status, dormant tough gatherable, tough vine, wood fiber, found them. Guang was overjoyed and immediately began gathering. Tough vine, X1. Tough vine, X2. The materials were complete. He immediately returned to camp and, without even waiting to rest, opened the crafting table. Upgrade. Reinforced stone axe. The simple stone axe, hard stone, and vines in the inventory disappeared at the same time. Crafting, 3 minutes. 3 minutes later, a brand new axe appeared in the inventory. Guang took it out. The appearance of this axe had changed drastically. The blade section was perfectly wrapped and secured with 3 hard stone pieces, and the handle was also wound with tough vines for a better grip. Reinforced stone axe durability, 50-50 gathering efficiency. Normal description. You can barely be considered a lumberjack now. Guang gripped the new axe and swung it twice. The center of gravity was steadier, and it felt heavier in his hands. He walked to the nearest red pine beside him, took a deep breath, and swung down hard. Bang! With a dull thud, the axe blade sank into the trunk twice as deep as before. Good. This is exactly the feel. Awesome. Guang's morale surged, and he began his frenzied lumbering campaign. After toiling hard for an entire day, Guang had barely rested. When the sun began to sink in the west, he finally stopped and leaned against a tree, gasping for breath. Hard work paid off, and the results were gratifying. In the inventory, the amount of wood hard had already accumulated to 80 units, but the durability of the reinforced stone axe had also been worn down by more than half. After a few more uses, it would need materials to be repaired. The cabin foundation required 200 units of wood, so he was still far from enough, but at least the tool had been upgraded. In the gaps between chopping trees, he also finished exploring the eastern area. The biggest surprise was that he found several patches of frozen red berry bushes. Enduring his hunger, he gathered every berry he could and stowed them all away. Frozen red berries, X45, his food anxiety, was temporarily relieved. With these berries, that little bit of cornmeal, he could last longer. Just as he was about to leave this area and return to camp, a faint rustling sound came. Guang whipped his head around. A gray wild rabbit was pawing at something in the snow not far away. Guang's heart instantly leaped into his throat. A wild rabbit. Meat. He held his breath, quietly circled to the downwind side, and tightened his grip on the reinforced stone axe in his hand. Just as he was about to hurl the axe with all his strength, the wild rabbit seemed to sense something. Its ears shot upright, and in the next second, like an arrow released from the bow, it bolted away in an instant, disappearing into the bushes after just a few leaps. Guang remained frozen in place, still holding the throwing pose. Damn, he cursed in frustration. He was not a professional hunter after all, and his body was too weak. There was no way he could catch such an agile creature. But he did not stay discouraged for long. If I can't catch you, can the system not catch you either? He looked at the place where the rabbit had disappeared. A clear trail of footprints was left there. He immediately opened the craftsman's crafting table. New recipe unlocked. Simple noose trap, required materials. Wood X1, tough vine, X1 crafting time. 30 seconds description. A crude trap that might be useful against small animals. Craft. Very quickly, a noose trap made of flexible branches and vines appeared in his hand. Guang walked to the spot where the rabbit had been foraging. This was a path it had to pass through. He carefully recalled the wilderness survival videos he had watched in his previous life, and, combined with the system's suggested optimal placement angle, cleverly set up the trap and camouflaged it with loose snow. Done. He clapped his hands and looked at his handiwork. Although he didn't get to eat meat today, he had a new tool, a stockpile of wood, berries, and had even set a trap. Tomorrow, hopefully there will be some gains. This body's craving for meat was already close to reaching its threshold. If I don't eat meat soon, I'm going to go crazy. Dragging his tired but fulfilled body, Guang returned to his little shack, carrying 80 units of wood hard. By the time he got back to the shack, Guang was almost too exhausted to straighten his back. He did not rest immediately. The blizzard seemed even stronger tonight. Cold air kept seeping in through the gaps in the thatch of the simple shack. The shack had to be renovated and upgraded. He couldn't save all the wood for building the house, or I won't even make it through tonight. He opened the blueprint construction interface, and sure enough, there was now an upgradable option on the simple shack icon. Upgrade to reinforced shelter, required materials. Wood hard, X50. Tough vines, X10 build time. 1 hour description. Adds wooden barriers and vine ceiling on the existing foundation, greatly improving warmth retention. Of the tough vines he had gathered today, only 5 were left, but he had enough wood. He was still short 5 vines. Guang frowned and glanced at the sky outside, which was gradually growing dark, gritted his teeth, picked up the reinforced stone axe, and headed into the woods to the east once more. After 10 minutes, he found that patch of old vines and gathered another 5. Returning to the shelter, he immediately chose upgrade. The materials in the inventory were deducted, and on the ghostly framework of the simple shelter, new structures began to appear. Under construction, 00:59:59, Guang did not just wait around. He used the time to stack the 30 units of dry firewood he had casually collected while chopping wood today in the corner of the shelter, then went to the stream to break the ice and fetch water. An hour later, a system notification came through. Construction complete. The originally crude shelter had undergone a qualitative transformation. The system had perfectly fitted the 4 walls with an extra layer of thick wooden planks, and every gap had been tightly sealed with tough vines and dry grass. At the entrance to the shelter, there was even an extra door curtain woven from vines and plastered with thick, dry grass. As soon as Guang lowered the door curtain, the howling wind was instantly shut out. Phew, warm. Tonight I can finally get a good night's sleep. He let out a long breath. The temperature inside the shelter began to rise noticeably under the glow of the campfire. He nodded in satisfaction, set the iron pot over the fire, and added only a very small amount of cornmeal. Cooking half a pot of gruel so thin you could see your reflection in it, then ate 5 or 6 red berries. Once the hot food hit his stomach, exhaustion crashed over him like a flash flood. He had to make sure his strength stayed intact. This body was far too depleted and had to recover step by step. Guang added plenty of firewood, wrapped himself tightly in the simple cold weather clothing, and fell into a deep sleep in the warm shelter. Meanwhile, dozens of li away in Bangchwigu, at the Gu family home. It was already completely dark, yet the main house was in an uproar. Sun Yume had waited all day. She had thought that little beast would freeze outside for a day and, by evening at the latest, come slinking back with his tail between his legs, kneeling to beg for forgiveness. But now, smoke cannons had already started going off outside, and there was still no movement at all in the courtyard. Without Guang, the work assignments from the production team had nearly cost her and Gu Shanjin their lives. When she went to fetch water, the ice at the well was harder than stone, and after smashing at it for ages until her hands split from the shock, She managed to carry back only half a bucket of water. Gu Shanjin, with a dark expression, was forced to tend those pigs and also repair the pigsty that the wind had blown down. All jobs that should have belonged to that useless eldest son. Even Gu Bao, who had always been treated like a treasure, was assigned to smash coal briquettes and gather firewood. "Mom, my hands are frozen stiff and my stomach still hurts." Gu Bao wailed with a miserable face, stomping his feet inside the room and refusing to go back out. He really didn't want to work anymore. "Even if they're frozen stiff, you still have to go." Sun Yumei was furious, but in the end she still felt sorry for him. She snatched the basket from his hands, yet the words she shouted were aimed at the air. "Damn that ungrateful brat. He ran off himself and left all the work to us. When he comes back, I'll skin him alive." After comforting her son, the anger and fear Sun Yumei had bottled up all day finally exploded completely. Every day that Guang didn't come back meant one more day of labor for her. She rushed to the edge of the Kong and screamed at Gu Shanjin, who was sitting there smoking in sullen silence. "Gu Shanjin, say something. Didn't you say he'd definitely be back today? Where is he? The pot is gone, and the axe is gone too. How are we supposed to get by tomorrow? Has your precious son died out there?" Gu Shanjin was also upset and agitated by this damned reality. He was puzzled too. Logically speaking, that cowardly, honest eldest son of his simply didn't have the nerve to spend the night outside. It's already been a whole day. It's cold and he's hungry, so why isn't he back yet? He's defying me. Driven into a corner by Sun Yumei, Gu Shanjin suddenly stood up and smacked the tobacco pipe against the sole of his shoe. He's just being stubborn. Does he think I, his father, will soften up and go look for him? Gu Shanjin jutted out his neck, forcibly maintaining his authority. "I'm telling you, impossible. With only those ragged clothes on him, where could he go? At most, he's found a cave somewhere to hole up in. Once he finishes off that little bit of cornmeal he stole and gets so hungry his head starts spinning, he'll naturally come back." Gu Shanjin sat back down again, speaking in a numb, unquestionable tone, as if he were convincing himself. "He can't make much trouble. He's my son. There's no way he'd abandon his own father." Sun Yumei took in Gu Shanjin's whole theory of filial piety. Thinking it over carefully, she felt it did make sense. In her memory, that stepson Guang, ever since he came to this family, had always been submissive and meek. Never mind fighting back, he didn't even dare speak loudly. In Sun Yumei's view, yesterday's outburst was nothing more than fever-induced delirium. A cornered dog jumping the wall. She sneered inwardly. Run away? She was still counting on this beast of burden to slave for the family, and, in a few more years, save up the bride price for her bower to get a wife. If he just ran off like this, what was her bower supposed to do? He couldn't run, and he wouldn't get far. Hearing Gu Shanjin mention the cornmeal, those eyes of Sun Yumei's, always shrewd and mean-looking, shifted slyly. She began calculating rapidly in her heart. 3 gene of cornmeal, she muttered. She was the one who ran the kitchen in this family. No one knew better than she did how long 3 gene of grain could last. A full-grown 20-year-old young man can eat a lot. Even if he rationed it and only drank something thin at each meal, it's freezing cold outside without something solid to eat. He wouldn't be able to stave off hunger. The more Sun Yumei calculated, the more reassured she felt. At the very most, 5 days. Those 3 gene of flour of his, whether eaten as porridge or solid food, would last 5 days at most. She arrived at her conclusion with certainty. Once he runs out of food, when this whiteout wind starts blowing, we won't even need to go look for him. He'll freeze stiff and go half mad with hunger, then crawl back begging us to open the door. "Mom, my hand hurts." At this moment, Gu Bao beside her was still muttering. He'd been forced to pound coal briquettes for half the day today, and the skin on his palms had been rubbed raw. Working is so tiring. When is that ungrateful wretch coming back? As soon as Sun Yumei heard her son complain, she let out an anguished "oh dear" and quickly pulled him onto the Kong to warm up, while her resentment toward Guang deepened even more. Soon, Bower, Sun Yumei told him the days she had calculated. Mom has done the math. With that little bit of grain he stole, he can last 5 days at most. Just bear with it a little longer. In 5 days, he'll have to come crawling back to our family and work like an ox and horse. Hearing this, Gu Bao's eyes finally lit up, and the grievance and pain on his face turned into malice and excitement. 5 days. Good. Gu Bao said through gritted teeth. I'll endure a little longer. When he comes crawling back, I'll make him pay. I'll get my revenge. The more he thought about it, the more excited he became, shouting loudly in front of his parents. I want him to kneel down and kowtow to me. However he beat me today, I'll make him pay it back tenfold. And all the work I've done these past few days, he'll have to make up all of it by himself. Double. These vicious words, full of a petty villain's triumph, echoed through the main room. Sun Yume and Gu Shanjin heard it, yet felt nothing was wrong with it at all. Wasn't that just the truth? Sun Yume stroked Gu Bao's head, her face full of doting affection. When he comes back, we have to break one of his legs and see if he still dares to rebel. If we don't teach him a proper lesson, he won't even know who runs this family. Gu Shanjin also took a puff of his dry tobacco on the side and gave a heavy grunt through his nose. In his view, for a father to discipline his son was only natural and proper. In this house, it's not that beast's turn to sit at the table. The faint light of dawn filtered in through the gaps of the reinforced shack's door curtain. Guang opened his eyes and felt completely refreshed. The wind had died down. He listened closely. The white-hair wind that had howled like ghosts crying and wolves wailing last night was now blocked outside by the thick wooden boards and vines, leaving only a muffled whooshing sound. Although the temperature inside the shack was still cold, at least there were no longer any drafts cutting through. The effect of reinforced shack was immediate, and the quality of his sleep improved greatly. The exhaustion brought on by days of high fever and constant rushing around was swept away. He skillfully added firewood to the campfire and set the crude iron pot on top. As before, it was still only a very small amount of cornmeal, which he cooked into half a pot of thin mush and swallowed down with 3 or 4 red berries. Once the hot food hit his stomach, his body began to warm up, filling him with energy. Today's goals: chop wood and explore the western area. But before starting work, he still had one more important thing to do. Guang gripped the reinforced stone axe tightly, suppressing a trace of anticipation in his heart, climbed out of the shack, and headed toward the place where he had set the trap yesterday. In the snow, beside his footprints, there was an extra trail of chaotic struggle marks. The discovery instantly made Guang's heart leap into his throat, and he hurried forward to check, brushing aside the layer of camouflage snow, only to see that the simple snare trap had tightened, the vine deeply cutting into a wild rabbit's neck. That gray rabbit had long since frozen stiff, its body still locked in the posture of its final struggle. Caught it. Guang's heart gave a violent thump. Meat, protein, chopping wood, and doing heavy labor every day without meat to supplement it. His body would sooner or later give out. The appearance of this rabbit was undoubtedly a gift from nature. It solved Guang's urgent need. Excited, he removed the rabbit from the trap. This rabbit was very plump. It felt heavy in his hand, at least 4 or 5 gene. He did not deal with it right away, but warily looked around first. After confirming that no other predators had been drawn by the smell of blood, he immediately returned to the shack. By the warm firelight, he set the wild rabbit on the ground. He had originally wanted to make a tool to skin and debone the rabbit, but then he suddenly smacked his forehead. Right, how did I forget about that? System decompose. There was no bloody gutting or disembowelment. Instead, the rabbit's corpse rapidly broke down and reassembled in the faint light. There was no doubt about the system's power. Decomposition complete. Obtained. Raw rabbit meat. X5 obtained. Rabbit fur. X3 obtained. Rabbit pelt intact. X1 obtained. Animal tendon. X2 obtained. Broken bone. X4. All the materials were instantly sorted and packed, appearing neatly in the inventory. Perfect. Guang was overjoyed. The inventory's preservation function meant that these 5 units of rabbit meat would be enough for him to carefully ration out over several days. And rabbit pelt and rabbit fur were also key materials for upgrading cold-resistant clothing. Suppressing the urge to roast the meat immediately, he wanted to keep it as emergency rations, so Guang temporarily set aside the newly unlocked recipes for rabbit meat soup and roast rabbit meat. Carrying the reinforced stone axe, he began today's work. Bang, bang, bang. With good rest and hope for the future, this body, worn down by years of hard labor, finally began to perform with the efficiency it was meant to have. The original owner had been worked like a beast of burden for 20 years, and although his body was badly depleted, his foundation was astonishingly solid, and his strength far exceeded that of ordinary people. Now, under Guang's control and paired with the efficiency of the reinforced stone axe, his logging speed was astonishingly fast. One red pine after another was locked onto by the appraisal view, felled, broken down into hardwood, and then stored in his inventory. By the time the sun reached overhead, he had already collected 150 units of hardwood. Hardwood X200 enough. He now had all the wood needed to build the wooden cabin foundation. Guang wiped away his sweat. Though exhausted, he was extremely exhilarated. He did not go back to build right away, but instead ate the last few red berries to replenish his strength. Then began carrying out today's second task, exploring the western area. Unlike the east side, the terrain here was gentler, and the bushes were denser. As Guang walked, he kept the appraisal view activated, carefully distinguishing everything beneath the snow. Suddenly, a system prompt made him stop in his tracks. Plant beneath the snow, unknown status. Dormant rhizomes rich in starch collectible. Unknown tuber, can be analyzed. Rich in starch? Those 4 words made Gu Eng's breathing quicken. The 3 gene of cornmeal would be eaten up sooner or later, and berries and game depended even more on luck. Only staple food was the true foundation for survival. He immediately put down the stone axe and used his hands to brush away the snow in that area. Beneath the snow was a patch of withered yellow vines he didn't recognize. Collect. Using the stone axe as a hoe, he carefully dug into the frozen soil. Soon, clusters of brown tubers that looked like a cross between sweet potatoes and yams were dug out by him. Unknown tuber, X1. Unknown tuber, X3. He dug up more than a dozen in one go, until the system notified him that this area's gathering limit had been reached. System, analyze it immediately. Analyzing. Estimated time, 10 minutes. Holding an unknown tuber in his hands, Guang paced excitedly on the spot. If this thing really could serve as a staple food, then his starter village would be completely secure. He sat down to rest and waited for the system's analysis result. 10 minutes later, he heard the system's pleasant notification sound. Analysis complete. Woodland yam quality. Common effect. Edible. Rich in high-quality starch and trace elements. Handling recommendation. Must be thoroughly cooked at high temperature, steamed, boiled, roasted before eating. Eating it raw causes a slight numbing sensation. Note: an excellent staple food source. Can be stored long-term and can also be planted. Haha, it's edible, and it can even be planted. Thank you for nature's gift. Guang was so excited he nearly jumped up. This was practically a heaven-sent gift. He wouldn't have to worry even after the cornmeal ran out. He looked at the slope before him, about half a mu of land that he had dug open. It was sheltered from the wind, and in summer it would be a sunny slope. And the soil looked very fertile too. What a great place. Letting it go unused would be such a waste. A sharp gleam flashed in Guang's eyes. He was already making plans. Once the wooden cabin was built, after spring arrived, he would reclaim this plot of land and plant it entirely with this woodland yam. Guang was practically humming a tune as he headed back to the shack. There was more than enough wood in his inventory. And woodland yam, X15, and raw rabbit meat, X5, gave him even more confidence. At last, he could finally eat a full meal. He ducked into the reinforced shack and got the campfire burning brightly. In winter, during these times, for a drifter to manage to eat his fill and eat meat by the 3rd day of fleeing was practically a miracle. System, you really are like my savior and benefactor. Guang sighed with emotion and began preparing this feast. He directly took out the woodland yam he had dug up today. He first picked out 2 fist-sized ones to use as seeds, to plant later after he had reclaimed the land. The remaining woodland yams would be his food for the next while. He placed the 2 seed yams into a separate slot in the inventory, then took one from the remaining yams and buried it directly in the hottest ashes beside the campfire. Roasted woodland yam. Crafting time. 15 minutes. Guang froze for a moment, not expecting that even roasting a yam could trigger the system's crafting function. But things produced by the system were always a bit better than ordinary items, so it should taste even better. Next, he opened the craftsman crafting table and found the tools section. Simple wooden skewer. Required materials. Wood hard. X1. Crafting time. 5 seconds. Craft. He used wood hard to whittle 3 sharp wooden skewers, then took out 1 unit of raw rabbit meat from the inventory. After being processed by the system, the rabbit meat had automatically become evenly sized chunks. He threaded the meat chunks onto the wooden skewers, then carefully took out that small clay jar, which held nearly half a jar of coarse salt. He scraped out a few grains with his fingernail and carefully rubbed them over the surface of the rabbit meat. Sizzle. When the rabbit meat sprinkled with salt came close to the campfire, the fat was instantly forced out by the high heat, producing a marvelous sound. A rich, overpowering meaty aroma, mixed with the saltiness of the coarse salt, instantly filled the tiny shack. Guang took a deep breath, feeling as if his very organs were trembling, lured by the fragrance. 15 minutes later, he dug the woodland yam out of the ashes. By now, the yam skin had already turned charred black, but the system prompt said, roasting complete. So it should be fine to eat. He eagerly broke it open. Hiss hot. A plume of scalding white steam rose out. The flesh inside was an enticing golden yellow, with a dense, fluffy texture and a sweet aroma like a mix of sweet potato and taro rushed at him. Not caring about the heat, he blew on it first, then took a big bite. Fluffy, soft, fragrant, sweet. The satisfaction brought by high-quality starch instantly filled his mouth. Guang had to admit that with the system's assistance, the yam tasted absolutely excellent. By this time, the rabbit meat had long since finished roasting as well. He picked up a skewer of roasted rabbit meat, already crisp on the outside, tender on the inside, and sizzling with oil, and tore off a big chunk. The charred fragrance of the rabbit meat, together with the primitive saltiness brought by the salt grains, exploded across his taste buds. So delicious. Guang wolfed it down, one bite of yam, one bite of rabbit meat. This was the most delicious and satisfying meal he had eaten in both his lifetimes since transmigrating. Calories and protein rapidly replenished this depleted body, and he even had the illusion that he could feel every cell cheering with joy. Full and satisfied, Guang leaned against the warm pile of dry grass, rubbing his slightly distended belly, feeling an unprecedented sense of contentment and security. Tomorrow, I'll start building the wooden house. I need to get it built as soon as possible. This shack has never really felt like a home. The food problem has been temporarily solved. So next he needed to focus on shelter. A place that could keep out the wind and rain was far too important. Besides, a wooden house could provide him with some protection, since this was the snowfield. And in a wilderness like this, wild beasts were bound to pass through from time to time. Meanwhile, in Bangchwagu, at the Gu family home, it was dark outside, but the main house was unusually lit up, and a faint smell drifted out. The faint aroma of meat. On the Kong table sat a basin of dark, freshly cooked stew. Sun Yumei, Gu Shanjian, and Gu Bao were gathered around it, each of them excitedly swallowing their saliva. Heh, Suehua, you've really got skills. Gu Shanjian picked up a dark piece of something, his face full of bliss. This sweet potato stewed with rat really smells amazing. It turned out that, while repairing the pig pen today, Gu Shanjian had unexpectedly cornered a palm-sized winter rat by the wall. And out in the snow, he had also picked up a small half-piece of sweet potato, already frozen hard, that had fallen from who knew whose home. In these times, when people were gnawing on tree bark, gains like this were no different from striking it rich. Treasuring them like precious goods, Sun Yumei stewed the rat and sweet potato into a pot, even adding a few extra grains of salt. Eat up, Baoer, this thigh meat is for you. Sun Yumei placed the best piece of meat into Gu Bao's bowl. Gu Bao swallowed it in one bite, hissing from the heat, but his face lit up. Delicious. It smells even better than the meat we ate during New Year. In fact, Gu Bao had almost forgotten what meat tasted like. He hadn't eaten meat for nearly more than a year. Now that he was finally eating meat, he was too excited to bear it. Before he had even finished what was in his mouth, his eyes were already glued to the remaining rat meat in the bowl. Haha, eat slowly. No need to worry about Guang, that ungrateful wretch, snatching it from you. Sun Yumei also picked up a bite and smugly sipped some soup. This feast put all three of them in an excellent mood. As they chatted, the conversation naturally turned to Guang, who had run away from home. Humph, Sun Yumei chewed even the bones to bits and swallowed them. Who knows which snow hole that little beast is starving in right now? Isn't it obvious? Gu Shanjian knocked the ash from his pipe against the sole of his shoe. By now, that little bit of cornmeal he had is probably almost gone. Maybe he's hiding somewhere gnawing on tree bark right now. Serves him right. Gu Bao licked even the sweet potato skin clean from his bowl and cursed gleefully, saying, with that ungrateful wretch attitude of his, he deserves to starve to death. When Sun Yumei thought of Guang possibly going hungry while their family was eating meat, a twisted sense of superiority rose within her. She said in a sarcastic tone, isn't that just proof he's cursed with bad fortune? If he hadn't run off and had honestly stayed home working, he might at least have gotten to smell this pot of good stuff today. Mom's right. The more Gu Bao thought about it, the more delighted he became, as if he could already see Guang kneeling and begging for mercy. Right now, he doesn't even deserve to smell it. He ought to starve to death out there. The three exchanged glances and all saw the same gloating smiles on each other's faces. For a moment, the atmosphere in the room grew even more cheerful. That feeling of satisfaction brought by a full meal filled Guang with strength from head to toe. He leaned back in the shack and rested for about half an hour, digesting his food, then got up again. Strike while the iron is hot, and make more traps. Since the simple snare trap worked so well, he couldn't rely on just one. After resting for a while, he got up and left the reinforced shack. By the light of the fire and the faint daylight, he came to the place where he had set the trap yesterday and, using the spare wood and vines in the inventory, made 3 more simple snare traps in one go. Making traps took time, and he didn't just wait around in the shack. Carrying his stone axe, he went outside and carefully, with the help of appraisal vision, found several more patches of bushes. In these bushes, There were obvious tracks left by animals, making it more likely that animals frequented the area. By now, the traps had already been completed. Guang took them out and set up each of the new traps one by one, then camouflaged them again. Only after finishing all this did he return to the shelter and fall into a deep, peaceful sleep. The next day, just as dawn was breaking, Guang woke up on time. After washing up quickly with snow, he did not even bother to light a fire or make breakfast. The first thing he did was go check on last night's investment. Carrying the reinforced stone axe, he inspected them one by one. The first trap was empty, its camouflage intact. The second trap was empty too. The third trap, the one that had caught a wild rabbit yesterday, was still empty. Guang's heart sank for a moment, but he did not lose heart. Hunting was always a matter of luck. He walked toward the last trap, which had also been set the farthest away. Before he even got close, he saw that the snow there was in complete disarray. His heart leaped with joy, and he rushed over. There, he saw a brightly colored pheasant tightly snared by the lasso, lying in the snow, already frozen stiff. It was a pheasant. Guang was overjoyed. Rabbits run, but this pheasant had wings and could fly for short distances, and he still managed to catch it. His luck was incredible. Without hesitating, he immediately crouched down and used the system to dismantle the pheasant. Dismantling complete. Obtained. Raw chicken, X3 obtained. Feather, X10 obtained. Broken bone, X2 obtained. Pheasant egg, X1 there were eggs too. This unexpected harvest put Guang in an excellent mood. He immediately stored all the materials in the inventory. This trap was somewhat damaged, so he dismantled it, successfully recovered part of the materials, then made a new simple trap and skillfully set it up again. Returning to the shelter, he happily started a fire. He set up the crude iron pot, fetched water from the stream, took out 1 unit of the pheasant meat he had harvested this morning, tossed in 2 forest yams as well, and added a small pinch of coarse salt. New recipe unlocked. Simple chicken soup stewed with yam very soon. A rich aroma of meat broth, far surpassing that of cornmeal mush, filled the shelter. Guang drank the delicious chicken soup and ate the stewed, tender yam and chicken, feeling as though he was living like a landlord. After finishing this hearty breakfast, Guang was full of energy and began the most important task of the day, building a wooden house. He came to the flat open ground beside the shelter that he had selected long ago and opened blueprint construction. Wooden house foundation 10x10 required materials. Wood hard, X200, stone block hard, X50 construction time. 3 hours time to start. He put all the wood hard he had stockpiled in the inventory and all the newly gathered stone block hard from yesterday into it. Under construction, 02:59:59, while waiting for the foundation to be built automatically, he did not stay idle either. Carrying his axe, he charged into the eastern forest again and chopped wood like crazy, stockpiling materials for the walls and roof to come. 3 days passed in a row. Guang had completely transformed into an infrastructure building maniac of the wilderness. His daily life was as regular as clockwork. Wake up, check the traps, chop wood, gather, explore, come back, and continue building. 3 days later, when the last roof beam was put in place, Guang stood inside his new home and let out a long breath. At last, he no longer had to live in that cramped shelter. This was a true wooden house in every sense, produced by the system. The foundation was made of hard stone blocks, and the walls and roof were thick, tightly fitted red pine wood. Although the crafting bench named it crude wooden house, it was sturdy, windproof, and spacious. According to Guang's design, the wooden house was divided into 2 areas, a master bedroom for sleeping. He had even planned the position of the heated brick bed in the blueprint in advance for later renovation. The other room was a kitchen for storing firewood and processing food. The system was just too powerful. Guang ran his hand over the smooth wooden wall, his heart full of emotion. If he had relied only on his own 2 hands, let alone 3 days, he couldn't have built a house of this quality in 3 months. He had already moved into the wooden house and was sitting on a newly made chair, taking stock of his total gains over the past few days. In terms of resources, most of the wood and stone had been used to build the house, and only a small amount was left in the inventory as backup. In terms of food, woodland yams. Over the past few days, he had found 2 more growing areas, bringing the total stock to 80 units. Red berries. He had gathered several large bags full, for a total of 300 berries. Cornmeal and coarse salt. A little less than half remained, and they had basically hardly been touched. Meat. The traps had yielded excellent results these past few days. Besides the 1 chicken and 1 rabbit he had caught at the beginning, he had also caught 3 wild rabbits and 2 pheasants. These gains were encouraging, but the price paid was also somewhat steep. A bitter smile appeared at the corner of Guang's mouth. He knew very well that this was the result of having nearly stripped clean all the resources within 1 kilometer of the camp that could be easily discovered by appraisal vision. Although for now these gains were enough to sustain him for quite a while, there would always come a time when they ran out. And as the snow grew heavier and heavier until the mountains were sealed by heavy snow, by then it would become harder and harder to obtain food. He had to get more food before that happened and store it in the inventory to cope with the harsh, long winter. He had to explore farther out. He couldn't just sit there and eat through his reserves. He looked at the window of the wooden house, an opening he had intentionally left, for now covered with rabbit hide, and gazed toward the deeper mountains in the distance. Next, he had to explore places farther away, and that would not be easy. It meant he would face a more complex environment, lower temperatures, and might even encounter large wild beasts, such as wolves or black bears. He had to be more fully prepared. Guang opened the crafting table and fixed his eyes on several newly unlocked blueprints. Rabbit fur gloves, simple wooden bow, bone spear. He had to make these tools for warmth and self-defense as soon as possible. These were already the best items he could currently craft. But in this forest of snow and ice, they were obviously not enough. If he could unlock more powerful blueprints, such as firearms, only then would he have some real security. All fear comes from insufficient firepower. Guang shook his head, suppressing these distracting thoughts. Right now, there was no way he could get those materials. The resources he had were still far too few, so he could only lie low for now. Just as Guang's wooden house was beginning to take shape and his life was thriving, back at the Gu family home in Bonchui Gully, the atmosphere in the main room had turned oppressively tense. 3 people sat on the Kong with worried faces, and no one said a word. Just a moment ago, the production team's captain had gone door to door, conveying the commune's latest task, repairing the irrigation canal. It was a mandatory target that had to be completed before spring, and they had to work no matter how cold the weather was. According to the rules, each family had to send one able-bodied laborer, who had to go before dawn to break ice on the frozen river to the west, and could only return after dark. Repairing the irrigation canal. Sun Yume kept muttering these 3 words, her face even paler than the snow outside. In previous years, was there ever any need to discuss this job? Before daybreak, she would kick the door of the woodshed, and that brute Guang would have to obediently crawl out of bed, take his tools, and go freeze in the cold. But this year, Guang had run away. And now it was already the 6th day. It was 1 day more than the 5 days she had estimated, yet there was still not even a trace of that little bastard. Gu Shanjin squatted by the edge of the Kong, taking one drag after another on his pipe. The swirling smoke could not hide the irritation on his face. The team leader said it. They must go tomorrow. Whichever family doesn't go will have all their work points for the whole year deducted. Bah, damn, that's black-hearted. But who told him he's the team leader? What are we supposed to do now? Sun Yume was the first to lose her composure. She didn't want to go break ice. Shanjin, about this job. Gu Shanjin shot her a fierce glare. Why are you looking at me? I'm the head of the family. How could I go do that kind of heavy labor? Sun Yume exploded at once. If you won't go, then should I go? I'm a woman. Where would I get that kind of strength? Even if I went, it'd be useless. Then I'm not going either. As soon as Gu Bao heard there was work to do, he turned pale with fright and screamed, I'm a child. I'm still growing. If you make me go repair the canal, I'll be worked to death there. With Guang absent these past few days, part of the work at home had fallen on him, and he could no longer bear it. The 3 of them shirked and passed the buck, each saying they had reasons they couldn't go. Gu Shanjin looked at this gluttonous, lazy mother and son, and a surge of anger rose in him. He suddenly slammed the pipe down onto the Kong. This is outrageous. Gu Shanjin put on his patriarchal air and pointed forcefully at Sun Yume. If you won't go, and Bauer won't go, then who's going to earn the work points? You'll all have to go. Not a single one of you is getting out of it. He had intended to force the mother and son to take turns going. But Sun Yume and Gu Bao were not buying that at all. Back when that brute Guang was around, Gu Shanjin was the head of the household. Now that they themselves had to risk their necks, what the hell did Gu Shanjin count for? Gu Shanjin, you useless coward. Sun Yume jumped down from the Kong and pointed at his nose as she cursed. You've got the nerve to throw your weight around with us, mother and son? If you've got guts, go find that little beast Guang and bring him back. Exactly. Dad, why should we be the ones doing this job? It's all that ungrateful brat's fault. Gu Bao also started shouting. Guang, Gu Shanjin, humiliated by the scolding, immediately found the perfect target to redirect the anger he had no outlet for. Right. It's all that little beast's fault. Gu Shanjin slapped his thigh. as if he had found the root of the problem. That damned, ungrateful wretch. He ran off himself and dumped all the work on the family. This is unfilial. He's trying to drive his father to death. I said he could never be raised right. Ever since he was little, I could tell he was a curse. Sun Yumei joined in the cursing too. When he comes back, I'll break his legs for sure. Gu Bao echoed viciously. The three of them, one after another, cursed Guang from head to toe, as if doing so could somehow get the canal repaired. When they were tired of cursing, the room fell into dead silence again. Tomorrow, who exactly was going? Sun Yumei was still the cleverest. Her eyes shifted, and she suddenly said, Shanjin, Bauer's dad, we can't wait any longer. Wait for what? Wait for that little beast to come back on his own. Sun Yumei said anxiously, he's definitely holed up in some cave in the woods. He's just being stubborn. We have to go find him. Gu Shanjin froze for a moment. Find him? It's already the 6th day. A normal person would have been dead long ago, and wasn't he still running a fever when he fled? No matter what day it is, he won't die. He's a beast of burden, tough as nails. Sun Yumei said through gritted teeth, there's food in the woods. He even took the pot with him. He's out there enjoying himself on purpose, leaving this life-threatening job for us. Gu Bao immediately caught on as well. Right. Dad. Mom. We have to go find him. Drag him back. He has to be the one to repair this canal. Egged on by the mother and son, Gu Shanjin also sprang to his feet. Right. How had he not thought of that? His obedient son was only being stubborn. He had to still be alive. As long as we catch him and hand him over to the production team, the family's work points will be secured, and none of the three of us will have to suffer. Good. Gu Shanjin made the final call, a hint of savagery showing on his face. Tomorrow, I'll go to the team and ask for leave, say something big happened at home. The three of us are going into the mountains. Even if we have to tie him up, we'll drag him back to repair the canal. Over the next few days, Guang's life fell into an extremely regular frenzy of infrastructure building. Bang, bang, bang. The sound of him swinging away in the forest had become almost the only constant sound in this mountain hollow. His main job every day was chopping wood. Although the crude wooden cabin had already been built, in Guang's eyes, it was just a shell. He was going to use the system to turn it into a true fortress capable of withstanding the bitter cold of -30 or 40 degrees. He put the newly felled wood hard, X150, and the previously collected clay, X50, as well as a large amount of stone hard, X80, into blueprint construction. Cabin upgrade, insulated structure required materials, effect, adds double-layer walls and roof insulation. Blueprint construction, simple heated Kong required materials, stone hard, X30, clay, X20 description, a heating system based on traditional northern frontier design, with the system optimizing the flue to ensure maximum thermal efficiency without smoke leakage. Built. After consuming a massive amount of materials and 2 days of time, the wooden cabin was completely transformed. The walls became much thicker, and the system automatically filled them with dry grass and wood fibers as insulation. A brand new stove was also added to the kitchen, connected to the earthen Kong bed in the master bedroom. When Guang lit a fire in the stove, it wasn't long before the bed in the master bedroom, built from stone and clay that heated Kong, began to radiate waves of warm, dry heat. So comfortable. Makes me want to just lie here and never go out. Lying on the warm, heated Kong, Guang felt every pore in his body relax and open up. Now this is what living like a human should be.